Understood. I'll write section 1 as a clear, immersive narrative, up to 1,600 words keeping it tightly focused on introducing Ethan Vale, main protagonist, establishing the shelter system's collapse event, and setting up the central conflict. Every sentence will push either the plot or character depth, with no unnecessary digressions, no headings, and careful pronoun use for clarity. Here's section 1. The wind above the canopy carried a dry, electric taste that Ethan Vale had learned to trust more than any weather forecast. From the balcony of his high-perched home, he watched the horizon split with pale lightning, jagged streaks crawling across the roiling cloud bank. The storm was coming earlier than the projections, but that was no surprise. Haven 6 had a way of ignoring human timetables. He adjusted the focusing lens of his scope, sweeping across the distant valley where the colony domes shimmered faintly in the sunlight. The translucent hemispheres were the pride of the terraforming authority, each one a perfect shell of climate regulation and environmental shielding. To most people, they meant safety. To Ethan, they were brittle toys pretending to be fortresses. The tree beneath his feet, a centuries-old tower of native hardwood, had withstood storms since before the first colony ship entered orbit. It would outlast the domes too. He stepped back inside, where the filtered light from the windows painted long amber lines across the floor. The walls curved in natural arcs, the grain of living wood merging with panels of reinforced alloy. It was not a house so much as a living machine. Every surface had a purpose: water catchments hidden in the rafters, power conduits woven into the beams, storage compartments pressed flush with the floor. He had built it for himself, far above the jungle's lethal ground level and far from the predictable failures of colony infrastructure. A soft chime from the comm panel cut through the low hum of the wind turbines outside. He tapped the control, and a set of diagnostic readouts bloomed in the air. Most were green, some yellow. Then a single icon pulsed crimson: shelter system network. The transmission window blinked open to reveal a scrolling text feed from the colony's central hub. Alert, perimeter shelter dome stability compromised. All residents to initiate emergency relocation protocols. Hazard level weather event in progress. He scanned the timestamp. The message was 32 minutes old. The domes should have automatically sealed and reinforced during a storm, but their internal capacitors were already registering zero output. No redundancy, no secondary power grid, nothing. Lightning flashed again, closer now, and for an instant the cloud ceiling lit like white glass. He saw it then, a shimmer breaking, like the skin of a soap bubble tearing. One of the domes down in the valley collapsed inward, the protective field dissolving in an invisible wave. The underlying structures had been designed for filtered sunlight and mild winds, not for the corrosive rain Haven 6 liked to hurl when it got temperamental. The comm feed erupted with overlapping distress calls. Audio cut in from multiple frequencies, voices thick with panic orders shouted, children crying, metallic groans of collapsing supports. Ethan's jaw tightened. He muted the channel. Noise without solutions was worthless. He moved quickly through the space, securing cabinet locks and cycling the independent power cell to full output. The air here was already cleaner than below, but he engaged the filtration baffles anyway. His home had been built for exactly this kind of isolation. Down in the valley, people would be scrambling for temporary shelters, most of them low and exposed. They would have minutes before the acid rain started to fall. He could stay here, weather it out, let the storm pass in relative comfort. He had food, water, power. Survival was simple when you planned for failure. The thought lasted only until the next comm signal arrived. It was short, not routed through the main network, but broadcast on a frequency Ethan recognized instantly. Vale. Ethan, if you get this, trapped, research outpost, North Quadrant. Vehicles down. Domes gone. Can't. The voice cracked, fizzled, then repeated in fragments. Marcus Hale. The xenobiologist from the outer research station. They had spoken maybe a dozen times in the last 3 years, usually when Marcus needed a parts run or some workaround the colony quartermasters refused to approve. He was brilliant, absent-minded, and, by Ethan's standards, painfully unprepared for living on a frontier world. Ethan switched on the directional receiver and triangulated the signal. The outpost was just over 10 kilometers through the canopy route. On a good day, with dry branches and no aerial predators, it was a 45-minute trip. In this weather, it would be suicide without the right equipment. He ran through the scenario in his head. Going out meant exposure to lightning bursts, acid spray, and whatever else was crawling in the canopy to avoid the storm. Staying meant ignoring a man he knew was going to die without help. He muttered under his breath, "Damn it, Marcus." Marcus hesitated, then said, "Not just who. What?" Before Ethan could push, the case emitted a soft chime. Marcus quickly adjusted a control, muting it, but not before Ethan caught the faint shimmer inside as if something alive moved in the containment field. The biologist's gaze flicked downward, searching for threats in the branches below. "We can't go back to the main colony," he said. "If this gets into the wrong hands." The canopy around them lit with a sudden glare, the kind that didn't come from lightning. Ethan recognized it instantly: ion thrusters. He banked hard, pulling them behind the curve of a massive branch just as a sleek craft shot past overhead. Not a colony model. Smaller, stripped of unnecessary plating, its hull marked with jagged streaks of black that looked almost like claw marks. "They're tracking us," Marcus said. "They were tracking you," Ethan corrected, already angling the bike into a downward spiral. "We just became a shared problem." The chase took them lower, where the canopy thickened into a maze of intertwined limbs. It was more dangerous here, the predators were bolder in the dimness, but the cover would make it harder for the craft to follow. Marcus kept glancing back, wincing with each jolt as the bike skimmed over uneven terrain. A streak of plasma cut through the air, smashing into a trunk beside them. Bark and sap exploded outward, sizzling where it touched the rain. Ethan didn't waste time looking back. He dove toward a fissure in the canopy ahead, a dark slit barely wide enough for the bike. The thrusters howled as he forced them through, the tips of the wings clipping leaves in a shower of sparks. When they broke out into a small clearing suspended high above the ground, the sudden openness felt almost unnatural. A cluster of withered platforms, remnants of some long-abandoned arboreal settlement, circled the edges. Ethan cut the turbines and let the bike drift to a landing on one of the sturdier decks. Marcus slid off, clutching the case. "You're not planning to stay here, are you?" "Not for long," Ethan said, scanning the skies. The hostile craft hadn't appeared yet, but the glow of its engines was visible through the cloud gaps. "We need to change direction before they figure out we stopped." He moved to the edge of the platform and tapped a control on his wrist. A small holographic beacon bloomed to life, its signal narrow and encrypted. He keyed in a code he hadn't used in years, one that linked to a man he'd hoped never to owe a favor. The reply came quicker than expected, a curt, gravel-edged voice that cut through the static. "Vale. You alive, or am I talking to a scav with your gear?" "Still breathing, Rafe," Ethan said. "Got company on my tail and a passenger with something worth killing for. Need extraction." "Coordinates," Colonel Rafe Danner said without pause. Ethan sent them. There was no need for more explanation. Rafe was a man who understood the weight behind a request like this. He didn't bother asking about payment or why Ethan had gone silent for years. Their history was complicated, built on a few battles fought side by side and an unspoken agreement not to pry. Marcus frowned. "Military? Retired," Ethan said. "Which makes him almost trustworthy." They lifted off again, cutting across the clearing at a low angle. The canopy swallowed them once more, the storm's noise masking the bike's turbines. Marcus kept scanning the shadows, but his eyes always came back to the case. "What's inside?" Ethan said again, softer now, "and don't tell me it's just data." Marcus exhaled slowly. "A Shivra spore cluster. Stable, contained, but..." "The Shivra," Ethan interrupted. He'd heard the name whispered among scouts and traders. Native to Haven 6, territorial, hostile to human expansion. The colony's official stance was that they were non-sentient aggressive fauna. The scouts knew better. "They've adapted to bypass the dome's filtration systems," Marcus said. "These spores aren't from the wild, they've been altered." Their growth patterns suggest directed evolution. Someone gave them the means to breach our shelters. Ethan felt the weight of that sink in. This wasn't just sabotage, it was an opening move in something larger. The comm pinged. 2 minutes, Rafe's voice came through. You'd better be in one piece when I get there. The bike jolted as something heavy hit the branch behind them. Ethan risked a glance back, one of the drones from before, its chassis dented but functional, claws gouging the wood. Another followed, both moving with unnatural speed. They had tracked them here. Ethan pushed the turbines to maximum, weaving hard through a tangle of limbs. The drones pursued relentlessly, their lenses glowing crimson. One leapt, landing on the rear stabilizer, its weight dragging the bike sideways. Marcus kicked at it, but the claws dug deeper. Ethan banked sharply toward a half-broken limb jutting out from a massive trunk. The drone smashed into it head first, tearing loose and tumbling into the mist. The second one closed in, only to be vaporized by a burst of high-energy plasma that cut across the canopy. They broke into a wider expanse, and there he was, Rafe Danner, standing on the deck of a heavily modified scout skimmer, plasma rifle steady against his shoulder. The man looked exactly as Ethan remembered, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with eyes that measured everything in terms of threat potential. Board now, Rafe called. Ethan brought the bike alongside the skimmer, and Marcus scrambled aboard first, securing the case against the railing. Ethan followed, glancing back at the canopy. The hostile craft was nowhere to be seen, but he could feel its presence lingering in the storm. Rafe didn't waste time. You've got 20 seconds to tell me why I just burned my last ion charge saving you. Ethan nodded toward Marcus. Ask him. He's the one carrying trouble in a box. Marcus looked from one man to the other, then said, the domes were sabotaged, Colonel. And if I'm right, the Shivra are coming. Rafe's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing on the case. Then we need to move before the storm stops hiding us. The skimmer banked sharply, cutting through the rain with a low hum. Ethan leaned against the railing, watching the jungle blur past, the weight of Marcus's revelation settling heavy in his mind. If the Shivra really had been given the means to bypass human defenses, then this storm was only the beginning. If you want, I can make section 3 immediately follow from here, starting with their arrival at Ethan's treehouse and the tense planning session that cements the core male team before the big assault. That section will shift the tone toward strategy, preparation, and character interplay. Understood. Section 3 will focus on deepening the relationships between Ethan, Marcus, Rafe, and the introduction of Cade Mercer, while developing the central conflict with the Shivra. It will carry the action forward logically from Section 2, with every sentence building plot or character, and will end with a strong hook that pushes the reader into Section 4. Here's Section 3. The skimmer cut through the storm like a shard of glass, each burst from its ion engines pushing them higher into the canopy's protective layers. Ethan stayed near the aft railing, scanning for any sign of pursuit. The hostile craft hadn't shown itself again, but that didn't mean it was gone. Rafe's skimmer was fast, but not invisible, and the Shivra had ways of finding prey without relying on sight. Marcus sat on a bench bolted to the deck, cradling the containment case as though a wrong movement might shatter it. His knuckles were white, his eyes fixed on the pulsating glow inside. The sound of the storm pressed around them, wind thrumming through the leaves, rain sizzling where it struck acid-resistant plating. Rafe's voice came from the forward controls. Your treehouse still where you left it, Vale? Ethan's lips twitched in the faintest smile. Still standing. Always will be. Then that's where we're going. I'm not running a city tour in this weather, Rafe said. The skimmer banked left, following a narrow corridor of air between massive trunks. The deeper they went, the more the world seemed to fold in around them. Ethan recognized landmarks, crooked branches, strange flowering clusters, the pale streak of a mineral vein running along a trunk's length. Home territory. It took another 10 minutes to reach the wide platform hidden among the upper branches. The structure emerged from the foliage like something grown instead of built, thick living beams intertwined with alloy reinforcements, the design blending seamlessly into the tree's natural form. Rafe brought the skimmer alongside the docking rail, and Ethan hopped across, securing the mooring clamps. The air here was clearer, the worst of the storm caught by the canopy above. Marcus followed, the case never leaving his grasp. The interior of the treehouse was warm with filtered light, a soft hum coming from hidden generators. Rafe stepped inside without ceremony, scanning each corner the way a soldier checks a room. His gaze lingered on the racks of tools, the neatly organized shelves, the faint shimmer of active shielding woven into the walls. "You've been busy," he said. "Prepared," Ethan corrected. Before Rafe could reply, the door swung open again and another man stepped in, rain still dripping from the shoulders of his patched jacket. He was lean, quick-eyed, with a restless energy that filled the space before he even spoke. "You call for help, Vale, and I think, sure, maybe it's just a drink. Instead I find you with a colonel and a man carrying a science experiment that probably wants to kill us." His grin was sharp. "Cade Mercer, at your service." Ethan shook his head. "Didn't call you. Didn't have to. Rafe owes me a favor, so when he moves, I notice," Cade said, moving past them to peer at the containment case. "What's in the glowing lunchbox?" Marcus bristled. "Classified." Cade looked delighted. "That means dangerous." "Excellent." Rafe shut the door with a heavy click. "Enough. We're not here to swap stories. Marcus, tell them what you told me." The biologist set the case on the central table and activated a small projection above it. A rotating holographic model appeared, microscopic detail rendered large enough to fill the room. "These are Shivra spores," Marcus said. "Genetically modified to survive filtration systems and to grow rapidly in high-humidity environments like the interior of our shelters. The modifications are precise, this wasn't natural evolution. Someone engineered these to bypass our defenses." Cade's smile faded. "And now the domes are gone." "Exactly," Marcus said. "The storm covers their movement. Once the weather clears, the Shivra will push into human-held territory without resistance." Ethan studied the hologram, the delicate threads of the spores forming intricate, almost deliberate patterns. "How fast?" "Days. Maybe less, depending on how many clusters they've released," Marcus said. Rafe leaned on the table, his presence filling the space. "If they've been given this kind of advantage, they won't stop with the outer settlements. They'll go straight for the central colony." "That's not our fight," Cade said quickly. "The central colony's got its own militia. They had the domes," Rafe said flatly. "Now they have rain, acid, and no line of defense." The silence stretched. Ethan moved to the side wall, pulling down a rolled schematic and spreading it across the table. It showed the surrounding canopy for kilometers in every direction, with elevation lines marking potential flight paths. "They'll have to cross the Fungal Plains to reach the main settlement," Ethan said. "That gives us one advantage, they hate open air." Marcus looked up. "You're suggesting an ambush." "More like a trap," Ethan said. "They navigate by a combination of thermal and echolocation. If we can flood the area with disorienting frequencies and disrupt their coordination, we can scatter them before they reach the settlement." Rafe studied the map, then pointed at a narrow stretch where the plains funneled between two massive tree formations. "Here. Natural choke point. We set up in the canopy and hit them from above." "That still leaves the question of bait," Cade said. "We can't just sit there hoping they wander into our party." Ethan's eyes moved to the case. "They'll come for what Marcus is carrying." Marcus stiffened. "Absolutely not. If this containment is compromised, then it's over anyway," Ethan said. "You said it yourself, they're already on the move. This isn't about keeping the spores safe. It's about making sure there's no one left to deploy them." Rafe's voice was steady. "We'll secure it. And we'll make sure it doesn't leave that choke point." The discussion turned to logistics, frequency generators from Marcus's research gear, reflective mylar sheets Cade had stashed from a salvage run, modified turbines from the skimmer to create directional sound bursts. Every piece had to be lightweight, portable, and able to be deployed quickly in the canopy. Cade volunteered to strip the reflective plating from the skimmer's underside, grinning as he left to fetch tools. Rafe began calibrating the rifle for extended range, muttering about the limited number of shots before overheating. Marcus adjusted containment protocols, reinforcing the seals against potential breach. Ethan moved through the treehouse, gathering coil anchors, reinforced harnesses, and spare power cells. The quiet between the bursts of activity was tense but purposeful. Each man understood that the coming hours would decide far more than the safety of this single outpost. By the time Cade returned with strips of gleaming material, the storm outside had begun to shift. The thunder was softer, the rain less constant. Somewhere beyond the canopy, the plains would be clearing, and with them, the Shivrar's path. Ethan secured the last of the gear and looked at the others. "We move at first light. They'll expect us to hide. That's why we'll be waiting instead." Rafe gave a short nod. Marcus closed the case with finality. Cade slung a coil of mylar over his shoulder, his grin back in place. Outside, the storm lightened just enough to let a shaft of sunset break through the clouds, casting the treehouse in gold. It was almost peaceful, and for a fleeting second, Ethan wished it would stay that way. But the forest's distant hum was wrong, carrying an undertone too steady, too deliberate. The Shivra were already moving. "If you like, I can make section 4 pick up immediately from that final line, driving straight into the ambush and full confrontation with the Shivra, ending with a definitive HFY victory." The hum of the wind had changed. For hours it had carried only the sharp, high whistle of the storm winding itself through the battered branches below, but now it dragged with it a deeper growl, a sound of air displaced by something immense. Rourke crouched low on the plank of his upper deck, eyes fixed on the dark swell moving across the valley floor. Even at this distance, he could see the shimmer of heat rising from its surface and the scattered sparks of light search beacons cutting through dust and steam. It was the first time in 3 days he had seen organized movement down there, and it meant the shelters might not be entirely lost. Or it meant someone else had claimed them. Cale emerged from the hatch behind him, stepping into the dim half-light with his rifle slung tight across his back. He moved carefully, as if the deck might betray them with a creak too loud. "Scouts." His voice was little more than a breath. "Too many," Rourke said without turning. "And they're pushing toward the east ridge. That's toward our supply drop." Rourke gave a short nod. The drop had been his plan, 2 days of salvaging and preparation so that if the shelters really had fallen for good, they'd have the crates waiting, tucked just inside the canyon lip. It was the only stockpile left that could keep them alive for the next month. And now, a shifting mass of armored shapes was rolling in its direction. Cale leaned against the railing, scanning the dark silhouettes in the haze. "You think they're scavengers or part of the evacuation teams?" "They're not carrying evac flags," Rourke said. "And they're not moving like they've got civilians. That means they're either hunting for tech or hunting for us." The wind swelled again, rattling the ropes and the canopy above them. Somewhere far below, a metallic crash rang out, a fallen transport or perhaps a container being forced open. The sound seemed to carry too easily, as if the air itself wanted to betray every survivor still holding on. "We move now," Cale said. "Too exposed," Rourke replied, shaking his head. "We wait until they're deeper in. Then we skirt around. And if they find the crates before we get there?" Rourke turned at that, his gaze sharp in the failing light. "Then we make sure they don't get to keep them." They both knew what that meant, and neither of them needed to speak it aloud. The treehouse had been their sanctuary, built high in the massive boughs of a sentinel tree whose roots dug deeper than anything else still living on this scarred planet. But sanctuary was a fragile thing now. The collapse of the shelters had stripped away the last illusions of safety, and the world beyond the canopy offered only dust, heat, and the desperate scramble for what little remained. By the time darkness folded fully over the valley, the shapes below had thinned, spreading into smaller groups that vanished between ridges. Rourke slung his pack over his shoulder, checking each clasp with deliberate precision. Cale fastened his chest harness, the faint scrape of buckles loud in the stillness. Every motion felt heavier than it should, weighted with the unspoken truth that this trip might end in a fight they couldn't win. They climbed down through the lattice of rope ladders, boots thudding softly against the trunk before finding the ground. The air here was thicker, holding the scent of charred foliage and damp soil, remnants of last week's heat surge. Rourke kept his steps measured, eyes cutting between the undergrowth and the faint glint of moonlight on his compass. They moved without speaking, the forest around them a black ocean of shifting shadow. An hour in, they reached the western ridge. From here, the path to the canyon narrowed to a choke point, a strip of crumbled rock that overlooked the entire valley floor. Below, in the moonlit mist, Rourke could see movement, 3 figures in reinforced gear, sweeping the ridge line with handheld scanners. Cale crouched beside him. They're too close to the drop. I see them. Rourke drew in a long breath. We split. I'll circle left, draw them toward the ridge edge. You cut through and get the crates. Cale gave a grim smile. You always pick the loud jobs. Because you're better at running, Rourke said, then was already moving, slipping into the shadows along the ridge. The first shout went up moments later, the sound cracking through the still night like gunfire. Rourke's silhouette darted between outcrops, the flash of his sidearm bright against the darkness. 2 of the figures broke from their sweep, moving to intercept. Cale didn't watch. He turned and sprinted along the ridge, dropping into the narrow cut that led to the canyon mouth. The crates were where they'd left them, 2 steel containers half buried under a scatter of stone. But the locks were gone. One door hung slightly open, a single strip of reflective tape dangling from its edge. Cale's gut twisted. Someone had been here. A voice echoed from behind, low and unfamiliar. He spun, rifle raised, just in time to see a 4th figure step from the shadows. No insignia, no evac markings. Just a dark visor and the hum of powered armor. Rourke appeared an instant later, blood on his sleeve, breath ragged. He didn't speak. He just fired. The blast lit the canyon like lightning. The figure staggered, sparks ripping from its chest plate. Cale moved, grabbing the crate handle with one hand while pulling Rourke toward the cut with the other. The sound of pursuit rose behind them, boots pounding against stone, voices shouting in a language Cale didn't recognize. They ran until the night swallowed everything but the rasp of their breathing. By the time they reached the base of the sentinel tree, Rourke's arm was slick with blood, and the crate felt twice as heavy as it should. They hauled it up through the ladders, every rung a test of will. At the top, Cale dropped the crate onto the deck and leaned hard against the railing, scanning the black horizon for movement. Nothing but wind. Rourke sank onto the planks, eyes closed, head tilted back against the trunk. We keep this, he said, voice hoarse. No matter what it costs. Cale nodded slowly. The shelters were gone, the valley crawling with scavengers and worse, but here, perched above it all with the crate at their feet and the world stretched out in darkness, they still had something worth fighting for. And tomorrow, when the storm returned, they'd be ready.